Good afternoon, and welcome to Smithsonian Gardens' weekly webinar, Let's Talk Gardens. Let's Talk Gardens is a great program if you're trying to make your thumb greener, if you want to learn more about design as today, or more about individual plants. We hope that you'll tune in to us and learn a lot from the experts at Smithsonian Gardens, as well as some other local experts. And today we have one of those local experts. Before that, my name is Cindy Brown. I'm the Education and Collections Manager at Smithsonian Gardens, and I want to remind you all to please put your questions in the chat box. Our speaker today, Kathy Jentz, is going to do something a little bit different. We're going to mix things up a bit so that in the middle of her presentation, we're going to stop and ask 2 or 3 questions. Let give you a chance to take a drink, a sip of water, and then we'll get back into the presentation. So today is all about urban and small space gardening. It's a book that Kathy has written, and she'll tell us more about it during the presentation. And it's something that will be a great resource if you're thinking about, what do I do with my garden or my empty space? Kathy is the editor and publisher of Washington Gardener magazine, a really great resource for local gardens and local gardening. So Kathy, I'm going to disappear and let you take it over, and then I'll come back on during the middle of the presentation, ask a couple of the questions. So please remember, put your questions in the chat so they're ready when I come back on. Thanks to y'all. I'll be back.
Thanks, Cindy, and thanks everyone for joining me. So as Cindy said, I'm Kathy Jentz. I'm editor and publisher of Washington Gardener magazine, and I have a new book I've co-written on urban gardening coming out next March, and we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. But first, I wanted to give a little quote. I like to do some inspiration usually at the beginning of my talks, and this one is, think small, planting tiny seeds in the small space given you can change the whole world, or at the very least, your view of it. So that's just to say, my definition of gardening can be just one pot on your office windowsill, or it can be a 1/4 acre lot in the suburbs, or if you're lucky enough to have a huge homestead or rural farm, that's great too. So any bit of gardening you can do heals yourself and helps beautify and heal the world. So let's jump into our urban and small space gardening talk. So let's see if I can get it to advance here. There we go. So we're going to start off with the not so fun parts about urban and small space gardening, especially for those who live in the city. These are some of the challenges that we encounter that some of the things I'm going to talk to you in a bit can address. So one is privacy. You know, you're living cheek by jowl with your neighbors, either in the suburbs or in the city. And sometimes you just want to relax and be with yourself and your own thoughts. So we'll talk about some ways to introduce privacy. Next is pollution, and that can be from passing cars, overhead pollution, air pollution, and of course trash that's come in blown from the road or dropped off by people passing by. You might need to contend with that. And this is a little not so fun picture here of a rat trap in the city, just to give you an indication of some of the challenges of city gardening. Then there's noise. So most of us like to enjoy our own music, our own thoughts. So ways that we can contend with some of the noisy city. And then theft. So theft can be from animals and pests, but it can also be from unfortunately, our fellow human beings. And just to tell a short story, I had a zinnia plant stolen from my front corner garden just today. I'm happy to let people pick flowers from my garden, but the whole plant being stolen is a little heartbreaking, but that is one of the many challenges of urban gardening. All right, so next we're going to talk about the benefits of urban and small space gardening. So one of the great things is increased interaction with your neighbors and others. So I live on a major commuting walking route between two different subway stops and right next to a small community college. So I get many, many people walking by and walking their dogs or just walking their kids to school. So a lot of interaction I have is with people stopping and asking me, what's that plant or what's that flower? And it's really interesting to hear people from all different backgrounds and nationalities asking about things and learning. And I'm always happy to share seeds and cuttings and things. And it's so fun to run into people and compare and contrast what we grow in our gardens. So another benefit of small space and urban gardens is that you can share resources, meaning your neighbors on your block or close by, you can order like a large shipment of mulch or topsoil or something and have that delivered to your driveway and then share it with the others on your block. You could also just buy one small electric mower and share it between each other if you just each have a little postage stamp front garden. So next is exposure to other ideas and cultures, which I kind of went over a little bit with the neighbors and others who come by. But I also find in my community garden plot, this is really relevant. So we have a great time exchanging seeds and produce and looking at what each other is growing. So maybe I'm growing okra and somebody from the north hasn't tasted that before. I'll let them have a taste of the okra and then we'll share our recipes and ideas for what we can grow in that community garden small plot too. And then immediate feedback. People will tell you immediately if they love your garden or if they don't love your garden. So often I'm out there gardening and weeding on my corner and somebody will stop their car and say, I love your flowers, or I love that tree, what is it? So great immediate feedback. And then finally, of course, there's that connection to nature. So I always give the example of how gardeners are much more connected to our natural world than most others. And I think in this past year and a half of COVID, that's really come home to roost, right? That those of us who might have worked in the office full time and then just come straight in and gone inside might have missed a lot that's happening in their garden and around them in the natural world. We know the seasonal changes, we know when butterflies are coming and going and when our wildlife is visiting and not. So we're much more in touch with that connection to our Mother Earth and nature. Right, so I'm going to jump into some ways that we can address some of those challenges and take advantage of some of those benefits. But my first slide here is to address those people who say to me, I have no space to garden in. And I often hear that. And I just want to say, use what space you do have. And this woman in particular has literally no space to garden in. She's in a basement apartment on a little concrete slab parking space, and she can barely pull in her little mini, like her little VW Bug, right into here. And she's taken advantage of all the space possible to put planters. None of this is planted in the ground. So these are literally cinder blocks that she's planted tall sedum into. She's got window boxes along the railings here and window boxes and planters, any tiny little crevice that she can put, she has planted and put a planter in. And what I love about her garden, just that she took advantage of all this space, is that she really maxed it out and made it a garden. So instead of just putting, say, all pansies or all annual flowers, she's put irises, she's got a little grape here, she's got herbs on this side. So she's got a many layered garden in just this tiny, tiny little space. So another example of using what space you do have. So this is a tiny postage stamp backyard on Capitol Hill. And this is just a little tow pool, just a little wading pool about a few inches deep. So nothing to swim in. And you can kind of see the scale of it by this lounge chair. So it's basically like 3 foot by 3 feet and just a few inches deep. So this planting space is all they have. And it's about, I would say, 6 to 10 inches in depth. And then you've got about a 6 foot high fence. So 6 feet by maybe a feet. So 6 feet of growing space, maybe 10 feet of growing space, but they've maximized it. And they've used one of the principles I'm going to talk about later on in this talk, which is repetition, to put this native wisteria at 3 points down this fence. So if you kind of put your hand up and block the native wisteria and you could see just the bottom planting, that's a nice little planting to have there, but it doesn't bring the eye up and then bring that repetition along the fence. And we'll talk more about that principle in a little bit. All right, another woman in a basement apartment who's maximized her no growing space, right? She just lives in this basement apartment, really dark in there, I'm sure, but she's able to grow herbs on her little front steps by putting the window boxes on each side and some peppers and eggplants here. And then she's got some marigolds up top above their door in a little planter. And I just love how she's maximizing that growing space where most people would say they have no space to garden. Right, and another person with no space to garden, a local restaurant, has a back alley here and then seating to the left, but they've separated the back alley and the front seating at their restaurant tables with these big stockade planters. And these are great for creating a border between things and also having immediate raised bed plantings. And what I love about this restaurateur is that they just didn't plant it full of herbs or things to use in the garden. They do have some basil and herbs and some hops here, but they also put in perennials and things that would benefit our pollinators. So long blooming annuals and perennials are mixed in here with some herbs and edibles. Right, so next is a backyard alleyway where they've paved over all their backyards. So again, there is no space to garden in per se, but what this creative homeowner did is put in a series of planters. So they built these box frames and put little shrubs and small trees in them to separate their little back alley parking space from their neighbors. And then they have some of their herbs and pots that they put out at the end of their deck. And what I love is that they've placed a few of the planters on wheels, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So they have their basil and tomatoes in a wheeled planter to wheel it out where it gets more sun during the day. All right, so here's more example of adding wheels to your planters. So again, this is a woman whose back alley garden was completely bricked over, so no in-ground planting space. So she's planted things into planters and then added caster wheels, and then she can open up the back alley fence. And to get these sun gold tomatoes some more sun, she can push the planters out during the day into the sun, and then at night pull them back in, close up the alley gates, and then they're perfectly safe and away from anybody who might want to graze on her tomatoes during the night. So, are you guys hearing me okay?
I hear you just fine,
Okay.
Kathy.
I just got a note that my microphone was failing, so I wanted to double check on that.
Nope, I can hear just fine.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
That scared me for a second. Thank you, Cindy. All right, so next, a small space challenge is when you have a tiny jewel box yard or space, you want to create a focal point to guide the eye. And one great way to do that is to have one beautiful specimen tree or plant. And in this case, in this tiny Georgetown backyard, they have a little golden rain tree, and it's just in a pot there in the corner. It's just beautiful when it's in bloom, but also beautiful when it's not in bloom. And then here's a small townhouse or row house front yard that I thought had everything that you need for a small garden, which is a beautiful small specimen tree, some great creeping golden Jenny ground cover, and then some mid-sized perennials in between there, and then a recirculating water feature. So it recirculates over the fountain into the stones and then back up through. So you can kind of see the shine of the water there. And then a couple of containers for color. But I think this is like, if you want just a little perfect postage stamp garden, this is the combination. Something tall, something mid, something flowing on the ground. And if you can get that movement of water, even better.
Okay, Kathy, I can still hear you, but now I can't see you. So you might have pushed your video button.
Okay, I don't think I did. Oh, you're not seeing me.
I'm not seeing you. Yes, I can see your
me
presentation just fine, but I can't see you at all.
Choose video, start video.
There, looks like it might be popping up.
Okay.
Boxes,
Very,
but you still aren't.
very, 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 very strange because I haven't touched anything or moved anything. But I'm going to go ahead and continue with the talk since the slides are the most important, and maybe during the
Okay.
Q&A we can try to get my video back up.
That sounds great. Everything's
All
working
right.
on my end, so we'll,
Okay.
okay.
Perfect, Cindy. Thanks. So our next way to guide somebody in your garden is to frame the view. So if there's something you don't want people to particularly look at, say there's a mess of garbage cans on one side or a storage area that you want to pull attention away from, you can use principles of framing the view. You can obviously grow an evergreen over an arbor, or you can create this beautiful curtain wall fountain that was in a Georgetown backyard. And this is recirculating, similar to the other recirculating fountain I just showed you, but it's pulling up water, coming down in a sheet. You can barely see it there, and then coming down here and into this little pool. And so when you step out their back door into this garden, you just hear shh, this beautiful noise of running water, and that's covering up a lot of the city noises and passing traffic that's behind this wall back here. So our next way to disguise things or to guide your eye in the garden is to use mirrors and light. So this woman in a Raleigh, North Carolina garden here on the left, she's created a big mirror that is sitting on top of a low kneeling wall. And I was nosy. She is adding and disguising those electrical poles to the back, but she's also adding light to a deep, dark part of this garden. So that was a great idea. And then here on the right, a smaller version of it. So just mounting an old mirror on a fence to create some more light in this darker part of the garden onto the little herbs and vegetable part. And then a little solar light right there is attached as well. All right, so more examples of using. This one is reflecting into a back alley here on the left, and on the right, their backyard is literally just a swimming pool. And this wall is a hospital wall behind them, and it goes up about 10 stories. So they've taken advantage of the wall by placing this mirror and this archway against it to reflect the light of the pool back in. And what I love about it is if you kind of put your hand over and eliminate that mirror, but the reflection of that beautiful pool water into that mirror and back onto each other creates this wonderful light effect. Right, so we talked a tiny bit earlier in that little backyard where there was a repeating Asian wisteria vine about repeating design elements, but I think this is the one trick that we can use, big or small gardens, doesn't matter the size of your garden, to create a cohesive effect and a beautiful look to your garden. And that's to use the same design elements in various ways. So that can be using all the same type of pot material, so all terracotta pots or all thrown pottery, or they could be all whiskey barrels, just whatever the material is, consistently using it throughout your garden. And then also creating a pattern to draw the eye by using repeating things like same type of grasses or a series of gourds or pumpkins like in this right-hand picture. So we were using bird houses or little ones to create a repeating pattern and to guide the eye in the garden. And of course, this is the Smithsonian Ripley garden on the right, where we're pulling the eye into the back area. Instead of having you come and look at the beautiful flowers just up front, your eye is pulled to the back and across. So that was a wonderful, clever way that Janet Draper did that. And our next is right plant, right place. So just to read your plant tags and do a little research before you purchase and plant a plant in its place is a great thing to do, especially for shrubs and trees that can quickly outgrow their place. A lot of times a plant tag will just tell you how big it's going to get in 10 years. So make sure you do the research to know that in 20 years, that Alberta spruce is going to be taking over your driveway, say. So in these two examples, we have a sum and substance hosta. So it's one of those large growing hostas. And on the right, it's on the left, sorry, it's totally taken over its planting bed and encroaching in the walkway. And on the right, in a little townhouse back garden, It's given center spot where it can expand and get to full size, surrounded by some beautiful ground covers and then some river birch trees. All right, so next is going vertical. So I wanted people to keep in mind not just going high, but going over and spilling over. So again, on the left is an example from the Ripley Garden at the Smithsonian, and that is spilling over with some beautiful dichondra silver falls. And on the right is a small rose courtyard garden where they're weaving a vine, a clematis vine, up an armillary to make a nice tall exclamation point in the middle of that garden. So a couple more ideas for going vertical. You can mount plants on a fence line. You can also even grow edibles. And I love this series of gutters that have been painted. And of course, drainage has been added. So you'll want to like drill a few holes along there into those. And then I love the fact that they change it out seasonally, and they have a little chalkboard paint here that they just erase and with chalk write what's in there. So this is obviously coming off the cool season spring where they have kale and salad greens, and then they'll be switching it out with strawberries and basil and other small things for the next growing season. All right, so other ideas for going vertical. You can literally put in a frame the pots that you got from the store to change them out seasonally. So instead of putting soil in and water maybe hitting the back of a wooden fence or a wall and creating a mildew or other problem behind it, you can just keep them in their pots and kind of have them at an angle there for a little shelf is placed there. What I love about the one on the right-hand side is that this narrow walkway is a little narrow for putting plants in, but what they did was they shaved off the back foot of each of these planters so it can sit up on this lip and still be level there. All right, so our next principle is to use plants as screening. So if you have a super busy street in back of you, which this person in downtown Annapolis has their swimming pool right here, and then every passerby is just peeking in right as they pass by. So they've used deciduous trees to screen. So they could have used evergreens, but then they would be blocking out a lot of their sun in the wintertime. So I thought this was a great choice to use deciduous trees, trees that shed in the fall, and then also this repeating element of a planter and repeating element of the trees. So our next vertical method is, of course, to use any wall or fence space. And one of those principles is Espalier, where you can literally attach the tree's limbs to that flat surface and have the tree or shrub grow horizontally along it rather than come out towards you. So rather than be out here in space, it's linear against it. And this is used a lot for fruit tree growing, especially in super small spaces, so you can maximize your harvest. And each of these limbs could actually be grafted with a different type of apple or pear or cherry or whatever the fruit tree you wanted to graft onto. On the left is a beautiful small magnolia. So we all know how big some magnolias can be, but you can still have a magnolia in a small space by careful pruning and espalier technique. And then there's just a couple examples of using a vine espalier and another one with different fruit grafted onto each of these limbs. So that's what these different tags are. And it's along a guide wire that is tacked onto this low brick wall here. All right, and so of course, vertically, we can hang planters. Window boxes are a traditional way to do it. And if you don't have enough windows for your window boxes, you can do like I did and go to the recycling yard, get extra windows and plant even more window boxes along your fence line with those extra windows. And containers. So they're your small space gardening's best friend. But one point I wanted to make about containers is they don't have to just be seasonal annuals. Containers can have shrubs, containers can have perennials, containers can have herbs and sedums. So anything that can be planted in the ground can be planted in a container. So just don't think about annuals in color. but think about background shrubs, small trees, herbs, and that sort of thing. And now, Cindy, we're going to jump into a couple more examples of containers from the Smithsonian, and we're coming up on our mid Q&A break. And these containers I just love. This one's from the U.S. Botanic Garden next door on the National Mall to you all, and that's the use of bulbs, and the drainage feet right there helps a lot. And if you do try bulbs in containers, you will want to have perfect drainage. So just be aware of that. And then on the right are some tropical plants that have been brought in from the greenhouse, and they're having their summer vacation outside at the Smithsonian.
That's lovely. Thank you, Kathy. So there are two questions that have come to the top that I really would like to share with you. And one is, do you have any suggestions for how to screen on the deck?
Yes, and actually a couple slides will show that. One of my favorite ways to screen off your deck, if you want to separate from your neighbors, is by using a lightweight cloth. So that could be anything from a mosquito netting to yards of tulle. And that's what I use in my own garden, are yards of tulle, because it's super cheap, usually about $1 or so a yard. And they actually put up with the elements pretty well. I mean, they could get a little dingy by the end of the season, but they're super easy to wash and then rehang.
Yeah, I did. My favorite that I've ever done is cut down some bamboo that shouldn't be where it was, and created a screen out of weaving bamboo. And if you get a bamboo splitter, which is a really cool tool, you can make it really thin, and you can really weave it just like a basket. You've appeared. You did it.
Got it.
Excellent.
I'm hoping this will last. I'm hoping it will last.
Me too. That's great. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing was, how do you winter container planted shrubs? So I think the question really means, how do you make sure that they're going to be okay in the containers?
Yeah, so one way is to make sure they're another hardiness zone colder than your hardiness zone. So if you're zone 7, you want to make sure that that hydrangea or that small shrub or tree is hardy to zone 6. So that's my one cheating way of not having to do anything else, and that they're perfectly fine to be in there in that container over the winter time. The other way, if it's, on the same hardiness zone, or you think it's a little iffy, is I'll push my containers up against my brick wall and surround them with leaves, or pack them in tight together, or put them in the compost pile, or burying them in the compost pile for a little extra insulation around them. So if you think it's going to be a really tough winter, or you think these are really on the edge of your hardiness zone, those are a couple extra ways to protect them. One caution I do have is, for a lot of us, winter is our wettest season a lot of times. So you'll want to still provide them with great drainage, because a lot of the plants we can lose in the wintertime are not because they got too cold or that the roots froze or something like that. It's because they rotted from just sitting in that winter damp.
That's great. Well, I'm going to stop with questions there, get back into your presentation so you have time to finish, but then I'm going to keep following along with the questions that are being asked. There's some really good questions, so be prepared.
All right, I can't wait for some more of those questions at the end. So we'll jump right back in. Let's see if I can get that to go. Yay! All right, everybody, you can see me, you can hear me. We're 2 steps ahead. All right, so our next is to use cut flowers and still life in the garden. So if you are entertaining or having some company over, or just want to have a fun vignette for the weekend, you can create a feel to the garden by just using cut flowers and still life situations. So on the left is a woman who loves purple, something after my own heart. So she's greeted her visitors with a mailbox stuffed full of lilacs, which I thought was wonderful. On the right is a person's backyard that is literally a deck surrounded by boxwood. There is nothing else green in this backyard. It's a tiny little patch, but they've created this perfect vignette of a barbecue with their little barbecue station here, and a arrangement bought from the grocery store. So you have bells of Ireland, some mums, some sunflowers, not flowers that would usually grow together in a garden, right? But a perfect combination here. And she's got a bandana and a couple recipe books and some barbecue tongs stuck into that arrangement. So she's saying, welcome to our barbecue. So a few more ways to create vignettes or scenes in your garden if you have just a tiny bit of space is, number one, make your maintenance part of your garden and make it a showcase. It just needs to be neat and neatly stacked and clean. So it's not the most beautiful part of your garden per se, but because you might only have a small space, people will be peeking back there and seeing it. So stack like with like, stack anything you can behind, and use containers to contain soil and extra sticks and that sort of thing, and tools. And then over here on the right is a little vignette. Nothing in here is planted. Everything is still in its container. So you've got mums surrounding a whiskey barrel, and they just poured mulch, so some bark chip mulch around it, and place these gourds here. And then of course you have your beautiful corn stalk to the back. And then this is just mums and grasses in their containers set behind a little row of bricks or stones. So none of that again is planted. All of that is temporary and can be switched out seasonally. So some more ways that we can expand our small space or urban gardens is by borrowing a view. So if you back onto a park, or you have a neighbor's beautiful garden, or you just have a beautiful view of the National Mall that you can take advantage of. So this is a rooftop garden in Southeast DC, and they have taken advantage of the beautiful view looking across the river here. And what I love about this rooftop garden as well is that they've brought natural elements up. So they have some stones here, they have some moss, and they have a small tree. A lot of times I'll see on rooftop and balcony gardens that they'll just have discrete containers sitting, maybe in a row or in a group, but they don't have that extra element, which is something natural to make it feel like it's a real garden. So think about what you might collect: some beautiful stones, some shells, and maybe even some other elements like sea glass or anything like that that you find in nature, a bowl of pine cones, anything that can express that this is, yes, part of nature. Even though I'm separated up high, up on a balcony or on a rooftop garden, I'm still in the midst of nature. So our next is to use color as accent. I find a lot of small space gardeners are afraid of color because they've been told that color shrinks the area and that they should just be using white. So they might have all white garden or all white flowers or all variegated foliage plants, which is beautiful and one way to go. But I would say do not be afraid of color. Use your favorite colors in your landscape. So a classic color combination is blue and yellows. And on the left here is a local farmer's market. And they've created this beautiful vignette in their plant selling area by just putting a fence line that they've painted blue in on brackets and set it in a parking lot. So if they can create a garden in a parking lot, you can create a garden. And on the right here is a small little backyard where they've echoed the colors that they're using in their seating area, in their plantings, with these yellow pansies here, some kind of heuchera and yellow to the back, and then that blue recirculating fountain right back there as well. So remember to use that color throughout your garden. So whatever color you pick, and again, as I said before, I'm a big fan of purple. So I love this use of purple fence and arbor on the left that's continued into their little garden shed and home, and even their front door is purple there too. So more uses of color. I just wanted to emphasize that paint is cheap and you can always repaint. So if one year you're in a blue mood, if the next year you're in a yellow mood, so you can repaint. So this is the same woman who had that gutter garden I showed you earlier in that same tones of blue. And she is in a row house right next to neighbors. So she's got her blue swing and her little tables there, her little strawberry garden down at the right. The person who asked about separating between your porches or your decks. This is a great example here in the middle where she has some gauzy fabric draping down, and she also is separated by hanging a old window and painting that frame, and then hanging some knobs on there where you could put some tools or other things. So that's a great way to separate. That could have been a mirror there, or it could have been a painting, but she's keeping that open window, I think, to bring in light from the street there, and then she could easily pull that drapery across when she wants more privacy. All right, so more color as accent. This is my little tiny backyard here where I've painted my white bench, which was against a white fence, Barbie pink, and I've switched that out several times. It's been purple, and now it's a bright teal blue. So it's just a fun pop of color right there next to my little backyard pond. And then here's a neighbor's garden on the right where they are decorative painters for a living. And I love the fact that they use this 2-level fence also to show off on their garden shed here an outdoor painting. So yes, there is a such thing as outdoor paintings. You can purchase them, or you can even make a painting outdoor proof by adding layers of shellac or glazing on it. It helps to have it under the eaves so it doesn't get hit by all the elements, but even if it does get a little wear and tear on it, it's still a great thing to have outdoor art with you in the garden. And one extra element I love in this garden is she had ordered a tree and it hadn't arrived yet. So in the spot where the tree was going to go, she bundled these branches together and made like a faux tree. And I thought that was a great way just to have a little vignette there until she got that new tree planted. All right, so really quickly, some more paint is cheap, color is accent. You can go a little crazy here, of course. So creativity and what colors you pick are up to you. And again, another example of drapery in the garden separating you from your neighbor. And they've stacked some pallets here to make a little faux wall between them and their neighbors as well. So adding water elements. So this is one of my favorite things to do in any size garden, but especially in a small space garden, because the sound of that water can again cover up the city noise around you. And it's so soothing, and it's something in our souls that is drawn to moving water in particular, to that trickle and that shine and that shimmer in the garden. And once you add a water element, everybody comes to your garden. And I mean wildlife and children and visitors. Everybody loves to be by that water. So on the left here is a really simple little vignette with just a bird bath, and that would of course need to be replenished with new water added to it every once in a while to keep it clean. And then on the right is just a small recirculating pond. This is an urn is on its side, and it's about a 3-foot oval. And this is in a deep, dark part of the garden. So when you are in this little tiny backyard, you hear the water trickling. You don't quite see it till you come around the corner and look under this tree. And you can see how dark it is by the moss that's growing on the urn right here, and some of the little deep shade ground covers that it's surrounded by. And you kind of see right there where the recirculating water is being pulled out and in to this little backyard vernal garden. So another couple examples of just adding water, and this is the same size as that vernal one I just showed you, that little vernal pool, 3-foot oval, but this is in full sun with a really highly moving little fountain. So that's like a high rate of splash, and you can adjust in your fountains the amount of splash or recirculating that happens. So if it's just a little tiny trickle that you want, or if you want a splashing or cascading sound to cover up more of the surrounding noise, you can do that too. And then, as I said, everything is attracted to water, especially small children, and they love to play in the water. So it's good to let them have access, but in a safe way, with this raised fountain here on the right. Okay, so our next principle is to bring the inside out. So I showed earlier the Smithsonian greenhouses letting their plants have an outside vacation. Here on the right is a homeowner doing that on her deck and balcony here. So she's just brought out her house plants, and they're having a wonderful summer vacation. Then they're going to go back inside when it gets cool at night And what I like about that is she didn't just line them all up along the railing at one level. She has them at different heights. So they all kind of get their own show. So think about layering your houseplants that you bring outside the same way that you would layer a garden bed. So tall to the back, medium in the middle, and then the smaller to the front or elevated up on a base like this. And on the left is an example of bringing the inside out that I just love. So this is a local novelist, and they have not just set up their little hammock here in the garden with a nice pillow, but they brought out a candelabra with little votive lights to light at night and have some light just to sip a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in the morning in their hammock. So some more examples of bringing the inside out. So this is a tiny little children's tea garden here. And just to give you the scale, these bricks have been picked up and turned on their side to form these little tiny herb gardens here. There's a little recirculating fountain, and these are child-sized table and chairs. So that geranium kind of gives you a little bit more hint of that scale. And this is a tiny little jewel box backyard. And this beautiful vignette just draws you in, and who wouldn't want to join that tea party right there at that table? And on the right, these homeowners have a deck backed by a alley wall here with fencing and then another brick wall. So they're hardly getting any light in this backyard garden. So they're just starting off with a few planters, but they've added in a candelabra, some cut flowers, and again, that gauzy type fabric that gives them a little privacy in this back garden that they've just started off. So one principle that I see a lot of people breaking in small space gardening is to use small things because it's a small garden. And I want to break that habit and just say you can use fewer larger things for more impact. And that especially is true of your paths and pavers. So don't buy a series of small, tiny path pavers or small bricks or stones to step on. Think larger. So these are both about, in these both examples, the pavers are a good 2 feet at least wide, some of them a little wider and deeper. And the one on the left, just a tiny little side yard garden, has these big stone pavers that lead you to the back through her little sensory and herb garden. And you can kind of see the scale of it with the bench here. And she's just done a beautiful job with that. On the right is another little side yard where they put pavers distance from each other. So you'll step on the pavers and not be mincing along. You'll have good footing. You have lots of clearance in both of these. So you're not worried about stepping on the plants, and you can enjoy the garden as you go through, picking your tomatoes on the right or smelling the lavender on the left. All right, so the other thing that I find a lot of small space gardeners like to skip is a seating area, because they want to maximize their plants, right? You want to have as many plants as possible in that garden, but then you forget that there's nowhere for you in that garden, for you to relax, for you to sit. So I'm going to encourage all types of gardeners, big space or small space, to think about adding more seating areas in their garden. So on the left, tiny little condo walkout garden, and all she has space for right here is this bench and this one pot, houseplant pot that she's brought out for the summer vacation. But she has everything she needs. She's got cushions, she's got reading materials in that little basket right there, and that one beautiful green plant, and that's a garden. And on the right is a typical suburban backyard where you have kind of that swale of grass and then some perennials and a tree and a shrub border to the back. And imagine that those two Adirondack chairs weren't there. So you can kind of put your hand up over the screen and block those out. It would be a nice little curved backyard there, but those Adirondack chairs set there, sets the scale, and also puts it in your subconscious mind that this is a place for me to go sit and relax under that tree. So that's the way to think of your garden, as a place to experience and not just be a workspace for you for your after work hours. So a couple quick more seating areas. The left is in deep, deep shade, and that little stone there on the bench says dream. And that's a great way to spend time in your garden, is daydreaming. On the right is a full sun, tropical back door pad, and this is again in a back alley garden, well, all they have is zero growing space, just concrete. And they've created this beautiful vignette of tropical plants with that red hot Adirondack chair. And a couple more great seating areas just for inspiration. This one is a little bit up a slope in a shady garden, and this one combines elements, a couple different recycled antiques put together with this stone bench set into the garden. And both of these I want to show that you don't have to sacrifice plants to have seating. You can actually put your seating into the plants carefully and have them amongst the beds and not sacrifice all that planting area. All right, and if all else fails, show your personality in your garden. So this is a way to welcome people, waving with your gloves. If you can't hide your wheelbarrow, you don't have a space to hide your tools, put them out front and center. If you're a lover of instruments and you also have no space to hide them, you can plant them up. And this is a Blackie sweet potato vine just planted here on a garden shed. And more examples of personality, a sedum cat, a little blue butterfly, metal accent stuck into a little blue spruce. And if you haven't started collecting water and wine bottles for your garden, I highly encourage it. So you create one of these beautiful bottle trees also to add to your collection. And then I was going to say, if all else fails, use humor. So signs can help. So if you haven't gotten to an area yet, if it's full of dandelions, just put a sign that says Field of Dreams. If you know your visitors are going to be snoopy and go back into your utility area, you can just add a little sign that says a secret garden because you know that they were going to peek back there. So really quickly, we had mentioned the book coming out, and it's the Urban Garden, 101 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City by myself and Teresa Spate. It's coming out next March from Cool Springs Press and Quarto Homes, and you can pre-order it now on Amazon. And so I've just shared a few of those 101 ways today. And then that's me and my grandfather's apple orchard as a child in Indiana. And these are the ways you can contact me. I believe a handout was sent to you, and that also has my contact information there. I'm totally available to answer garden questions and to let you know a few more sources for our talk from today. And I have a new podcast that came out last year called Garden DC. And I apologize for the phone ringing in the background if you guys can hear that, but hopefully it'll go to voicemail soon. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And again, my podcast is Garden DC. And I think we're just coming up on a few minutes left for questions.
We do. Thank
Yay.
you, Kathy. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you and hear you and see the slides, but great ideas for small gardens. I've answered some of the questions as we've gone along, but there's one that I think everybody would benefit from. And that was a question I'm combining. You had those galvanized tubs that were metal. And so big, it would, if you filled it entirely with soil, it would take a lot of soil. So
I'm going to go all the way back.
Good. Okay. Do you have tricks? I know I have some, but I'm sure you do have tricks for not using the entire thing, filling it entirely with soil, and also tricks from helping those plants survive in a metal container in a hot summer in full sun like we have.
Yep, I'm trying to scroll back to those containers. So there they are. So yeah, these are available more and more now. They used to be just at farm supply, so they were meant to hold water for your cattle or your sheep or whatever. So there's different sizing you can get. This is probably a horse or cattle size one. So the planting space in here is just to maybe that second rib, and they've put a false bottom in there and drill drainage. So that's number one tip, is to put that false bottom so you could get like a good piece of plywood or some type of weather resistant wood and cut it to shape and make sure there's plenty of drainage. Some people will add wheels to the bottom of these also so that they're movable. And also you'll notice it's kind of a rolled metal over the tip. So it's got an insulation. There's a little bit of an air pocket in there. So I find that the plants don't cook. So some metal containers that are thin walled or steel can get really hot and soak up that summer sun. But because this is meant for holding water for your livestock, I don't find that they heat up. And actually on a summer day, I'll touch the side of them and I don't feel the heat on the aluminum. Do you, Cindy?
Not as much on the aluminum, but my idea would be have a big container. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
small container where the roots are coming in contact with that
Yeah.
wall, they are going to burn. So the
Yeah.
bigger container, plain in the middle of the container, I like the idea if it's insulated. I've actually lined the containers with
Mm-hmm.
different things to give so the roots aren't touching the edges of the container. And I've also used plastic milk jugs to fill the bottom so
Yep.
I don't have to do a
Yeah.
false bottom. I just put something underneath there. I don't ever use the new type of peanuts, the styrofoam peanuts, because
Mm.
they break down. And so
Yes.
your plants are going to squish. The old-fashioned ones you can use, except they float to the surface. So that's a
Yep.
couple good hints for you. How
Mm-hmm.
about if you inherit all concrete backyard,
Ah.
should you go to the expense of removing it, or what do you suggest?
So I would say to start off, like that first woman in our first slide, where she just lined it with containers and created planting areas, and then do that for a year or so just to see your pattern of use and how you would like to plant in it, rather than start removing it, because that can be really expensive to hire somebody to come in and remove that concrete. So if you know after a year or so that you want to expand in about 4 feet on this side and make a curve here. Another fun thing to do is after a light snow to go out and create beds in the snow. So your snow covered driveway or even a piece of chalk when it's not snowing, you can do that too. And create beds, draw them on there, and then set plants in there or pots and see how you would like that arrangement, and then measure and see how much you want to take off or are able to. So sometimes depends on your HOA, depends on your local municipality. But yes, as much of that concrete as you can turn back to growing space, great.
I love those ideas. And then you can use the chunks that you have removed to make a
Mm-hmm.
small wall. So you're having even
Exactly.
more of a raised area. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't let
Um,
them take away that good recycled pieces. Ask them to
no.
make them into small chunks that are usable for you, like 6 inch by 10 inch or so. Not big chunks. They'll leave you with some big slabs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And that would be really hard to move around. I've had
Yeah.
gained so many muscles since I've started gardening. So this is an easy one. What is the
Mhm.
minimum path width recommended for a small garden?
So about 3 feet is good. I know when I start gardening, I'll get it down to like 18 inches because I'll squeeze through. And that's like do as I say, not as I do, because I'm
Mhm.
greedy. I do prefer a blousy garden where plants are able to come over and weep over the pathways. Some people prefer more formal and straight edges to their garden and want to keep those plants off of there. So depends on your taste on that, but I would say a good 3 foot width to start off with and maintain for safety reasons as well, but also just for visual reasons so you can see down that whole row.
Yeah, and I have been at the Smithsonian long enough that I'm going to emphasize that accessibility is key. So,
Mm-hmm.
as much as we want to make our space filled with plants, remember, a garden's not truly a garden unless you have visitors and not
Mm-hmm.
just yourself. And I figured that out years ago. If my family never wanted to squeeze in small spaces, I made the spaces big enough for them, and now it feels like a true garden. So be kind to your visitors when you're doing that. I'm looking for other questions. Oh, one that I've answered one time in the chat, but it's good to reiterate this. When you're bringing your house plants in, what do you do special so that you don't have all those pests crawl all over your floor inside?
Mm-hmm. Well, sure. One of the things we can do, and we learned this through COVID, right, is quarantine.
Yeah.
So we're going to take those plants in and maybe put them in a separate, if we have a second bathroom we can use, put them all in the bathtub and give them a week or so. Or maybe you have a sun porch or a shed that you can put them in an in-between area and observe them. So look over and under the leaves, get out there with like a little magnifying glass sometimes. And then if you can put them in the shower and give them a good rinse or hosing off, that can knock off, you know, the majority of anything that might come inside. I've had the unfortunate experience of bringing in a pot full of ants. They had moved up and into the pot, and that's a big mistake. So just bringing it straight into the house, setting it down, and having a pot full of ants was not a good idea. So you definitely want to have that interim, move it, let the ants or whoever else evacuate, and then move it inside. So it'll be a two-step transition for a lot of your pots. And then of course, if you have something super sensitive to diseases, say like orchids, then you really want to keep them separated, maybe for even longer than that, a month or two, before you would put it amongst your orchids that were staying inside, because you definitely don't want to transfer any disease to those plants that you have inside.
Right. Well, we only have a couple seconds left, so I want to thank you and thank our audience for joining us today, and say you have some wonderful questions that you've asked us today. And how you learn how to garden is to start gardening. Don't be afraid. And Kathy and I talk about that a lot. Just start gardening. You will learn so much that way. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Come to more Let's Talk Garden webinars. We enjoy sharing information with you, and we enjoy having you visit our gardens. You can always ask our horticulturists, our experts as well. So thank you, Kathy. Good luck. See you soon. See
Happy
everyone else
gardening.
too. Happy gardening. Bye-bye.
Thanks.